Hi guys, welcome back to Battle Pithola. This is Mujala Olua and I'm super thrilled to be here once again. Today we want to continue from where we stopped in the last episode, talking about writing my LLM dissertation. If you're just joining this series, please watch the first episode. This is the second episode. In the first episode, we talked about choosing the topic and we talked about the LLM, in general. So in this episode, we're going to be narrowing down to chapter 1 and chapter 2. And I'm just going to provide a bit of more light on choosing the topic. Please subscribe to the channel and bring your friends along. Like I already said in the first episode, the topic was balancing the competing interests of humanitarian intervention and state sovereignty. Lessons from Libya. It's a topic that emanated from the International Law of Conflict and Warfare module that I undertook during my master's program at Liverpool John Moores University. And so that's what I decided to write my graduate thesis on. And I've talked about choosing my topic, but just to recouch, the important things that you need to keep in mind when deciding your topic is what area of law do you love? For some people, they could have an area of law that they like that prompted them to, do a master's program. And for some other people, they would find what they like even as they undertake the master's program. Like in my own case, I decided to do a general LLM because I did not want to specialize just yet. And while taking modules in international labor law, international corporate governance, and international criminal law, international human rights law, and international law of conflict and warfare, I decided that I fell in love with international law of conflict and warfare, especially the concept of humanitarian intervention. So if that is your own path too, fine. So you could fall in love with that, but it's important for you to write about something that you love. I often tell people that, for your LLB program or for your graduate program, if you're not in law, it could be that you did not get to write about a topic of your choosing or of your own liking. But for your master's program, you have more latitude. It's important to write about something that you love. That's one. Number two is that what knowledge do you seek to add to the body of knowledge already in existence in the world and in that field? So it's important for you to be filling a literature gap. Very important. That will help you decide your topic so that you do not end up talking about something that's already overflowed and is unimpressive or something that does not do anyone any good in the long run. So it's important for you to consider what's the literature gap that I'm trying to fill, and how does this add to the existent body of knowledge in the world and in this field, in this area of law. Then the third thing you need to consider is how easy will it be for you to get material that's research material, resource materials that you need, by looking. Are you going to do a desk research? Are you going to distribute questionnaire? Is your research going to be qualitative or quantitative? And whichever one it is, it's usually decided by the school anyways, but whichever one it is, it's important for you to consider how easy it will be for you to gather, resources, especially for your chapter 2 and 3. It's important. Chapter 2, chapter 2 is literature review. You're talking about what other people have said, and then you're drawing a conclusion. And then in chapter 3, we get to hear your own thoughts, your own point of view on the situation or on the topic itself, the idea, the concept, the area of law. So it's important for you to consider how easy it will be for you to gather resources and to be able to generate resource or research material. That's number 3. Number 4 is it's important for you to consider how wide or how narrow the scope of what you want to write about is, because the research is time bound. So you do not want to do something that's so wide that you end up being all over the place and unable to cover enough grounds for you to even make an impression or for you to draw a logical conclusion. And it's important for it not to be too narrow that you end up not adding that much useful knowledge to the already existent body of knowledge. So it's important for you to consider that. How wide or how narrow is what you want to write about. So when you're framing your topic, the topic will actually frame the scope of your work. So it's important for you to make sure that what you decide is going to be your topic is something that you can flesh up in the long run, and something that would not be too wide or or too narrow. Very important. There are several other considerations, but these are some of the most important considerations, in deciding what your topic would be. It's important for you to choose a topic that is catchy, a topic that interests whoever picks it up at first glance. It's important for you to apply the principle of a lady skirt: long enough to cover the subject matter, short enough to keep the viewer interested. So it's important your topic should be long enough to cover the subject matter that you want to research upon, but short enough to keep your reader interested, your supervisor, at first instance, and then the world at large interested, so that whoever picks up your topic is interested. Oh, what's this person going to talk about? Let me go through the abstract, or let me even go through the entire body of the paper or the thesis. So very important. These are things you should consider in deciding the topic of your dissertation or your thesis. Having chosen a topic, the next thing would be for you to write a chapter 1. Usually abstract comes before chapter 1, but I will always advise, as I often do, that you should write your abstract at the end of the work, because the abstract is essentially summarizing the entire work. So it's important for you not to preempt yourself and not to narrow the scope of your research by writing the abstract first. So do chapter 1 to 4, chapter 1 to 5, whichever one you're using, and then at the end you already have a fair understanding, or a great idea, not even fair now, a solid idea of what you have put down. And then from there, you can write a summary, which would now be your abstract. Very, very important. And so, having gotten that out of the way, let's go to chapter 1. Chapter 1 is the introduction into the thesis or dissertation. Usually, it contains an introductory paragraph or two. Then it contains the historical background of the concept that you're writing about, especially in the case of law, LLM. Usually you have to trace the history of the concept that you're discussing. So you have the historical background, and then you'd have a few more things. I'm going to look into my own paper now, my thesis, and tell you what I put in my chapter 1 and why. And then we're going to look at the school's complete guidelines, for the entire work, so that we appreciate what we are doing here. For my chapter 1, I have introduction, background to the research problem, purpose of the study, and I have research gaps. So those are the 4 headings that I have in my chapter 1. Yours may differ, because these are the things that the school said they wanted to see in my chapter 1. I had already initially adapted my proposal into chapter 1. But then when I went back to read the instruction, and this is very important, all through the writing of your dissertation or thesis, make sure you keep going back to your school's instruction. It's important, because no matter how erudite you are in scholarly presentation or writing, the school will grade you against their own criteria. So it's important for you to keep going back to the school criteria to check, am I on course? Am I in line? So when I started, I thought, I figured, chapter 1 is going to be very easy. So I just readapted my research proposal. Since it was marked 100%, no corrections, I adapted it into chapter 1. And then I discovered that when I went to the school criteria to cross-check again, they had actually highlighted some things, which are the things I've read out to you here, that they want to show in our chapter 1. And those are, they want the following headings: introduction, background to the research problem, purpose of the study, and research gaps. Because I had even intended to put research gaps at the end of my chapter 2. But they said they want it in chapter 1. The school wanted it in chapter 1. So very important to follow your school's instructions. And the school also gave us a breakdown of the number of words that they were expecting. So it was easy to group the wordings that should be in each chapter. So I'll try to look for the chapter by chapter instructions now. Much later, maybe I can put it in this video, but if not, let's first go over the general instructions, and then we'll come back to chapter 1 and some other things that I did. So this is my school's guideline. I want to read it out to you briefly so that you'd have a fair idea of what the school actually wanted me to do, which is very important. You have to look at what the school wants you to do, because they are going to mark it at the end of the day. Submission guidance and marking criteria. That's for this Liverpool John Moores University dissertation. That's 7,500. That's the code. And they said that word count limit 12,000 words plus or minus 10%, excluding footnotes, references, and appendices. So I ended up writing 13,000 words plus in total, plus all the references and all of that. But I had in mind that the school had said plus or minus 10%. So initially, when I had written 12,000 words, I was concerned about the word count. But when I remembered that I had the latitude to add at least 10% of 12,000 words, I was able to tie in some other things, and I add a fine finish. So very important. So procedure in the these are instructions for extenuating circumstances not relevant to what we're talking about. Then academic misconduct, including plagiarism. Ensure you're familiar with the relevant regulations regarding academic misconduct. By submitting the assignment, you declare that it is your own work and that the material and sources of information used, including internet sources, have been fully identified and properly acknowledged. In addition, you confirm that the present work has not been submitted for any other assessment. You also acknowledge that the faculty reserves the right to investigate allegations of plagiarism and other forms of academic misconduct, which, if proven and dependent on the severity level of the offense, may result in a penalty that could affect your progress. By submitting your work, you acknowledge that you have read and agreed with the above statements. So this is just the school's policy on plagiarism. Then general guidance. Your assignment, which is the dissertation, should be Microsoft Word processed. Very important, because when I finished my work, I tried to turn it into PDF format so that it will not jumble up my structure while submitting, because I was going to submit into the virtual learning software platform. I said software platform. I was going to submit on the virtual learning platform. So I didn't want it to be jumbled up when whoever is going to access it will download it from their end. So I converted it to PDF, but I think I went back to check how I had submitted my previous papers during the course, and then I now came back to these guidelines and I saw that, wow, it's supposed to be in Microsoft Word. So I had to leave it in Microsoft Word, submit the Microsoft Word version. So very important. This is why I say that at every step of the way, keep coming back to the guidelines. Very important. Handwritten assignments are not accepted. I have a friend that is doing a master's program in Nigeria, in a Nigerian university at the moment, and he told me that the lecturer had asked for handwritten assignments at master's level. It was very funny to me. But anyway, the school here is saying that handwritten assignments are not accepted. Using Times New Roman or Arial size font 12 font, double spaced with numbered pages and your student number printed as a footer on every page. Note, this is a report supported by academic research, so you should adhere to the appropriate referencing guideline. The word limit stated for this assignment excludes footnotes and the list of references at the end of the assignment, but includes all text in the main body of the assignment. People often approach me, or let me say sometimes approach me, to help them look over what they've done for their own dissertation, even before I wrote my own dissertation at graduate level. And sometimes I know that one of their worries is usually exceeding the word count. They are always worried. I always tell them at every instance, let us check or send to me the school guideline. And each time I look at it, most schools exclude footnotes and references. Some students don't pay attention to this, and they count it as part of their word count, and then they are worried that they've exceeded the word count. No, it's not part of it. Footnotes, list of references at the end of the assignment are not part of the word count, but it includes all text in the main body of the assignment, including direct quotations, in-text citations, tables, diagrams, and graphs. Please be aware that exceeding the word limit will affect the academic judgment of the piece of work and may result in the award of a lower mark. It's important to keep to the word count, because they are also testing your ability to present the result of your research with brevity and concisely. So it's not so much about how well or how wide you can write, than how concisely you can present your the result, the outcome of your research in a format that can be well and easily understood. So very important. So appendices are not considered a supplement and will not be assessed as part of the content of the assignment. As such, they will not contribute to the grade awarded. However, it may be appropriate to use an appendices section for any material which is a useful reference for the reader. Please note that the appendices are not included in the word count. The majority of references should come from primary sources, including journal articles, conference papers, reports, etc. Although you can also utilize area-specific textbooks, you must ensure that you use the Oscola style of referencing. Please indicate the word count length at the end of your assignment. So you can see there's a referencing style approved by the school is Oscola. That's what we use throughout the master's program. So I was well familiar with it. But each time I had to write a paper at the end of the module, and even during this dissertation period, I had to go back again. There's a separate document explaining Oscola referencing style. So I had to keep going back to it. We used the 9th edition. I had to keep going back to it to read it again. How did it say I should cite a newspaper, for instance? How do I cite sources from social media, for instance? How do I cite the UN Charter, for instance? How do I cite, a journal article? What comes before what? Is it the year before the name? Is it initial or full names of the authors? If there are 2 or 3 authors of a paper, how do I write their names? All those things. I have to keep going back to check. Sometimes I would even browse to see if there are samples I can look at. Sometimes I try to use referencing tools. Those things are useful, reportedly, but I wasn't really able to use much of them, especially the popular ones that most people swear by. I tried, but I just couldn't understand it fast enough. So I literally did manual referencing, and then I tried to use some online referencing, and then some of those online referencings are not correct. I noticed that I would say, okay, cite this for me in Oscola, blah 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 blah. I'll put it in, and then when it comes out and I go and check the school's Oscola document, the way that the citation has been arranged would differ from what the school is requiring. So it's important to pay attention to these things. Very important. So that then marking and assessment. This assignment will be marked out of 100% and contributes to 100% of the total module mark. The pass mark is 50%. That's 50 over 100. I had 70. Hallelujah. The marking rubric is attached, which offers guidance on the assignment, on the assessment criteria and weighting. Late submission. There will be a stipulated deadline, of course. That no late submission is allowed. Submissions after the deadline receive 0%. Because it's going to be submitted online, this is very important, because they will shut down the website or the platform if you don't submit. Because even when you submit in time, it marks the time you submitted, and it says something like, when I submitted, it told me something like, oh, you have submitted 7 hours before the deadline, you have so and so. So very important. So learning outcomes applied in this assessment, that thinking skills, subject-based practical skills for life and work, general knowledge, all that. Then task. Following your tutor's approval on the topic you have chosen in week 3, you are required to submit 12,000 word dissertation. Structure of the dissertation. Now, this is the structure. This is the structure suggested for your dissertation thesis. It's a suggestion, but it's better to just follow it. Title page should be briefly put but explicitly describe the purpose of the dissertation. Blah, 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 blah. Remember to add your name and student number, assessment number, and which assessment it pertains to. That's very important. Don't get carried away with the body that you don't do those preliminaries. Then summary, abstract. We've talked about that. They said should be no longer than 200 words. Okay, and they've talked about what it should contain. Then content, table of contents. They've explained what they want to see there. Introduction now, which is chapter 1. The introduction gives an overview of the dissertation essay you propose to carry out. It explains the background of the case study, focusing briefly on the major issues of its knowledge domain and clarifying why these issues are worthy of attention. Blah, 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 blah. The introduction should endeavor from the very beginning to catch the reader's interest and should be written in style in a style that can be understood easily by any reader with a general science background. Blah, 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 blah. And then literature review. We've talked about that too. Discussion and analysis, then recommendation and conclusion. From this, you can tell that we're using a 4-chapter style. So introduction, chapter 1, chapter 2, literature review, chapter 3 is discussion and analysis, and then recommendations and conclusion is the final chapter. Then appendices and list of references. So then there's a marking criteria attached, which shows you what will be marked against what. Literature review. Okay, now, yes, this is the word count that I was talking about initially. So the introduction, 500 words, which means that the school expects you to put 500 words in your chapter 1. Literature review, 5,000 words. The introduction is 10 marks. Literature review, 5,000 words, 30 marks. Results and findings discussion, 5,000 words, 30 marks. Recommendations and conclusions, 1,500 words, 20 marks. Then formatting and referencing, list of references not included in word count, that's at another 10 marks. Total of 12,000 words for the content and 100 marks. So it talks about the high quality, what they want. So for introduction, that's chapter 1 now. Let's go to chapter 1. They have said that what they want is general background on the topic you're going to discuss, possible definition for terms relating to the question, what the dissertation will include and or leave out, that's the scope, and then what themes the dissertation will discuss and the order they are presented, what the dissertation will argue or demonstrate, that's your thesis statement. So that's what they want to see in chapter 1. Notwithstanding what they said that they wanted to see in chapter 1, when I got to the submission platform, I saw that they had also highlighted some things that they want to see in chapter 1 particularly, and it was supposed to be 500 words. So I had to rewrite my chapter 1 according to the specification on the submission platform. So that is why I ended up with those 4 headings that I spoke about earlier. Introduction. So let me just read my introduction. I'm not going to be reading everything, but this is my introduction. Now, another thing is, if before you get to this point where you have to follow the suggested headings that they want to see or content, after you might have read it and then you're looking for how to develop it, a good idea, which is something I also tried, apart from highlighting what I wanted to develop in my own notes, another useful thing to do is to ask ChatGPT or ask AI. You could use any other chat software that is convenient for you. So I typed in something like balancing the competing interests of humanitarian intervention and state sovereignty, lessons from Libya. What should be the content of my chapter 1? Or what could possibly be contained in what could my chapter 1 possibly contain? So it listed out some things for me. I did not use all of them. Not all of them were relevant, but it helped me to develop my chapter 1 further. And I used it for most of the chapters. It's just a suggestion. It doesn't mean you will copy it out and then you will start writing it, because you could be shooting yourself in the leg. And if you're writing about something that you're interested in and that you've researched on, you don't even need that. But it's useful to guide your thoughts, especially if you are prone to getting confused and splattering your thoughts all over the place. It's important. It helps you to streamline your content. So you could say, what should be my chapter 1 for this type of topic? Then you put in your topic. So it will tell you should have this, that. And then you could even use those headings to develop, maybe copy out the headings and then write one paragraph under each, and then join it together and see how it coheres. So very useful. Another thing I did was that I called my LLB supervisor, Dr. Adigun, at the University of Ibadan. So Dr. Adigun is someone I've always spoken to, even after I left. I wrote my first degree thesis on kidnapping. I juxtaposed 2 anti-kidnapping laws in Nigeria. That's what I wrote for my LLB thesis. So after I left school, I kept in touch with my supervisor, So I think we speak once in a blue moon actually, but we speak for long when we do speak. So we usually speak for an hour or 2 hours or over. So this time when I called him, I told, because I had informed him that I wanted to do a master's, I told him when I got those admissions that I didn't use. He even wrote references for me into those schools. He advised me, all of that. So when I was ready to do my thesis, I called him. I was like, oh, I'm writing my thesis. This is my topic. This is what I'm leaning towards. And he was opposed to my own disposition. He had a different perspective. He thought sovereignty was a dead idea, that there was nothing like sovereignty. He also thought that, the approach of the United Nations in intervening in Libya was wrong. He had some useful suggestions on how they should have approached it. Then he also talked about some things that should have been considered, which are things that I actually considered and thought about, when I was writing my paper, even though I maintained my own stance because I wanted to look at it from a certain perspective. But we discussed it at length and it was so wonderful. So that's one thing that was also important and useful for me. So I called him up, we spoke for over 2 hours. We didn't just talk about Libya and humanitarian intervention, we talked about sovereignty. He recommended a book for me to get, and thankfully I found it in my school library. So I had access to the school library, the online library. It was very useful for me to gather resources, especially for my chapter 2. So it helped me to read wide, and get access to books that money cannot buy, because the exchange rate in Nigeria and the limitations on card purchases and all of that. So it was very useful talking to him. So thank you so much, Dr. Adigun. So if you have the latitude, to speak to your supervisor or someone in academia that you could probably run ideas by, you can also do it. So I remember that day he asked me to get RIP Sovereignty by Don Herzog, I think. So he was talking about how, and we talked about international law at length. He helped me see a better perspective, because I was also of the opinion at that point that if international law is this powerless, then why is it even a law? So he was able to help me see that sometimes you look at things not from its failures, but from its successes. And you look at things, like, if this thing is not there, what would have been the situation? Rather than saying that, oh, it's there and it's not even doing this, it's not even doing that. It might not be doing that, but if it's not there at all, can you imagine what would be the situation? So, so it was important, and it was very, very useful, instructive for me to have called him up and discussed with him, at length about my topic. But I maintained my stance. I said that essentially I'm looking at, there's a law that backed up the intervention. Did they comply with the law? How should interventions be done in the future? Should we have a separate law that will state explicitly, instead of us deducing and saying that, oh, the UN Charter actually did not say this, but it said this, which could mean this and that and that and that and that. So chapter 1, Introduction. Balancing the competing interests of humanitarian intervention and state sovereignty is a complex and delicate task that has been exemplified by the events in Libya. The 2011 intervention in Libya, authorized by the United Nations Security Council to protect civilians from human rights abuses, highlighted the tension between the responsibility to protect and the principle of non-interference in the state's internal affairs. Lessons from the Libyan intervention provide valuable insights into the challenges of upholding human rights while respecting the sovereignty of states. By examining these lessons, we can better understand how to navigate the intricate balance between humanitarian intervention and state sovereignty in the international arena. I'd love to read all of my chapter 1, but I've learned not to read all of a document on these videos, because some people would actually pay attention and put it down word for word. I once had someone even asking me to provide the text of something that I had used because they wanted to include it in the book they were publishing. No, please. Thank you. So then I have background to the research problem, where I traced the history of humanitarian intervention back to the 19th century, interventions. Then where I traced the history of humanitarian intervention dating back to the 19th century, interventions in Greece, the Kingdom of the Two Sicilies, Syria, Crete, Bosnia, Bulgaria, Macedonia, and all of that. Interventions in Cuba, Congo, the Dominican Republic, Grenada, Central African Republic. I traced it down to 2011 when the Libyan intervention happened. And then I talked about classical theories that had supported humanitarian intervention in the past and how it evolved into a customary principle of international law. Then I talked about the purpose of the study, which is basically aims and objectives combined. So some of these things can have different names according to the school's preference or your own preference as a researcher. Then I talked about the research gap. Now, the research gap is that I am contributing a practical viewpoint to the ongoing academic discourse on the legality of humanitarian interventions. I said this in the first episode. It's easy to get carried away and talk about the socio-political relevance of this topic, but that's not why we're here. We are here to discuss the legal aspect because this is a law master's degree. So I delved into the intentions of the UN Charter and international law by focusing on the rationale and the methods of intervention rather than just the socio-economic outcomes. So by examining the constraints on sovereignty in a crisis like Libya's, my research explored the current legal framework and norms related to humanitarian intervention and state sovereignty. Then I analyzed the decision-making process of the United Nations and I proposed criteria for future interventions. This study advocates for a clear legal and practical position for humanitarian intervention as a necessary doctrine. So that's essentially what's contained in my chapter 1, and that gives you a window wide enough into the research that I carried out in this dissertation. So for time and the length of the video, we'll pause here, and then in the next episode, we'll talk about chapter 2, which is about 5,000 words. This one is just 500 words, and see how long it took us to go through what we have in it. I will see you in my very next video. Keep watching, leave me comments in the comment section, and don't forget to subscribe. Toodles!